Chapter 1. The air in Blackthorn Hall carried a chill that didn't come from the drafty windows. Built in 1897, the dormitory loomed at the edge of Ashwood University's campus, its Gothic spires clawing at the overcast sky. Most students avoided it, whispering about flickering lights, footsteps in empty halls, and mirrors that reflected faces not your own. But for Kai Nakamura, a transfer student with nowhere else to go, Blackthorn was his only option. Kai dragged his suitcase up the creaking staircase, the smell of old wood and damp stone clinging to his senses. His scholarship covered tuition, but dorm assignments were non-negotiable, and Blackthorn was the last available spot. The hallway on the third floor stretched endlessly, lined with heavy oak doors, each engraved with faded numbers. Room 313. His new home. He knocked, half expecting no answer, but the door swung open almost immediately. Standing there was a guy about his age, 19 or 20, with tousled black hair, pale skin, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a black hoodie and ripped jeans, a silver chain glinting at his neck. The guy's gaze swept over Kai, sharp and unreadable, before softening into a lopsided smile. "You must be Kai," he said, voice low and smooth, like a melody you couldn't quite place. "I'm Ezra Locke. Welcome to the creepiest dorm on campus." Kai managed a nervous laugh, stepping inside. The room was larger than he'd expected, with two single beds pushed against opposite walls, a shared desk cluttered with books, and a tall window overlooking the foggy quad. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. A faint scratch mark marred the wall above Ezra's bed, barely visible in the dim light. "Thanks," Kai said, setting his suitcase down. "Heard this place is weird." Ezra's smile flickered, something unreadable passing through his eyes. "Weird's one way to put it. You'll get used to the quirks." He paused, leaning against the desk. "Or you won't." Kai raised an eyebrow, unsure if Ezra was joking. The other boy's presence was magnetic, like he carried a secret he wasn't ready to share. Kai shook it off, unpacking his things, a few clothes, a laptop, and a worn sketchbook filled with charcoal drawings of cityscapes and faces he'd never met. As night fell, the dorm grew quieter, the kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums. Kai lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, where shadows danced despite the lack of light. He glanced at Ezra, who was sprawled on his own bed, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. The soft glow illuminated his face, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw and the faint scar above his left eyebrow. "Hey," Kai ventured, propping himself on his elbow. "You've been here a while, right? Any ghost stories I should know about?" Ezra pulled out an earbud, his expression unreadable. "You believe in ghosts?" Kai shrugged. "I believe in what I see. And this place, it's got a vibe." Ezra chuckled, low and warm, sending an unexpected shiver down Kai's spine. "Fair. Blackthorn's got history. They say a student died here in the 70s. Room 313, actually, hung himself from the ceiling beam." He pointed upward, where a dark, uneven patch stained the wood. "Some say he never left." Kai's stomach twisted, but he forced a grin. "Great. So we're bunking with a ghost." Ezra's eyes locked onto his, intense and searching. "You scared?" "Nah." Kai lied, his heart thudding. "Just curious." Ezra's lips curved into a smile that felt like a challenge. "Good. Curious is better than scared." That night, Kai dreamed of a figure standing at the foot of his bed, faceless and silent, its presence heavy as fog. He woke with a start, sweat beading on his forehead. The room was dark, save for the faint moonlight spilling through the window. Ezra's bed was empty. Chapter 2. The next week passed in a blur of classes and awkward small talk with Ezra. Kai couldn't shake the feeling that his roommate was watching him, not in a creepy way, but like he was trying to figure Kai out. Ezra was a paradox, sarcastic one moment, gentle the next, offering Kai coffee from his stash or sketching in a notebook he never let Kai see. Their conversations were light but charged, like static before a storm. The dorm's strangeness grew harder to ignore. Doors slammed shut on their own. The mirror in the bathroom fogged up with no steam, and once, Kai swore he saw a shadow move behind his reflection. At night, whispers echoed through the walls, too faint to make out, but loud enough to keep him awake. He didn't mention it to Ezra, not wanting to seem paranoid, but the tension was building. One evening, as rain lashed against the window, Kai sat at the desk, sketching a jagged tree inspired by the gnarled oaks outside. Ezra was sprawled on his bed, reading a tattered paperback. The silence between them was comfortable, but Kai felt a pull to break it. "So," he said, glancing up, "you ever hear stuff? At night?" Ezra's eyes flicked to him, sharp and curious. "Stuff like what? Like whispering? Or footsteps? I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it." Ezra set his book down, sitting up. "You're not imagining it. This place talks. Always has." He hesitated, then added, "You want to know the truth about Blackthorn?" Kai's pulse quickened. "Yeah." Ezra stood, crossing the room to sit on the edge of Kai's bed. The proximity sent a jolt through Kai, their knees almost touching. Ezra's voice dropped, conspiratorial. "The guy who died here? His name was Daniel. People say he was in love with someone he couldn't have. Drove him to it. Now he's stuck, replaying his pain. That's what the whispers are, his voice, trying to be heard." Kai swallowed, his throat dry. "You believe that?" Ezra's gaze softened, almost tender. "I believe some things don't let go, not even after death." The air between them felt electric, heavy with unspoken words. Kai's hand twitched, wanting to reach out, but he held back. "Have you ever seen him, Daniel?" Ezra's expression darkened. "Once. Last year. I woke up, and he was standing by the window, just watching me." He touched the scar above his eyebrow, almost absently. "I don't know what he wants, but he's not dangerous. Not yet." Kai's heart pounded, not just from the story but from the way Ezra's eyes held his, like he was sharing a piece of himself. "Why stay here, then, if it's haunted?" Ezra leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I'm waiting for something. Or someone." The moment stretched, fragile and charged, until a loud thud echoed from the hallway. They both jumped, the spell broken. Ezra was on his feet in an instant, grabbing a flashlight from the desk. "Come on," he said, his tone urgent. "Let's check it out." Chapter 3. The hallway was pitch black, the overhead lights flickering like a dying pulse. Kai followed Ezra, his heart racing as they crept toward the source of the noise. A door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. Room 315, long abandoned, its number barely legible. Ezra pushed the door open, revealing a dusty room identical to theirs, except for a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and Kai's breath clouded in front of him. He glanced at Ezra, whose face was tense, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "See anything?" Kai whispered. Ezra shook his head, but his eyes were fixed on the mirror. Kai followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. In the reflection, standing behind them, was a figure, tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes and a noose around its neck. Kai spun around, but the room was empty. "Ezra," he hissed, grabbing his arm. "The mirror." Ezra's jaw tightened as he looked. "That's him, Daniel." The figure in the mirror moved, its head tilting as if studying them. Kai's pulse thundered, but Ezra's grip on his hand was steady, grounding. "Don't run," Ezra murmured. "He feeds on fear." The whispers started again, louder now, a jumble of words Kai couldn't decipher. Ezra pulled him closer, their shoulders brushing, and Kai felt a rush of warmth despite the cold. "Stay with me," Ezra said, his voice low but firm. "He can't hurt you if you don't let him." Kai nodded, his hands still in Ezra's, their fingers interlocking. The figure in the mirror raised a hand, pointing at them, and the glass cracked further, spiderwebbing outward. Kai's breath hitched, but Ezra's presence kept him anchored. "Let's go," Ezra said, tugging him back toward the door. They stumbled into the hallway, the door slamming shut behind them. Back in their room, Kai collapsed onto his bed, his heart still racing. Ezra sat beside him, closer than necessary, his hand lingering on Kai's arm. "You okay?" Ezra asked, his voice soft. Kai nodded, though his hands were shaking. That was intense. Ezra's thumb brushed against Kai's wrist, a small, intimate gesture that sent a shiver through him. "You did good." Most people would have bolted. Kai met his eyes, finding warmth there, and something deeper, something that made his chest ache. "You stayed calm." "How?" Ezra's smile was small, almost sad. "I've seen worse. And I had a reason to stay." Kai's breath caught. The room felt smaller, the space between them charged with possibility. He wanted to ask what Ezra meant, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, He leaned closer, their faces inches apart, the air thick with unspoken feelings. Then the whispers started again, faint but insistent, breaking the moment. Ezra pulled back, his expression conflicted. "We need to figure out what Daniel wants," he said, standing, "before he gets stronger." Chapter 4. Kai's heart hadn't stopped racing since they'd fled room 315. The memory of Daniel's hollow eyes in the mirror clung to him, as did the warmth of Ezra's hand in his. Back in their room, the air felt heavier, the whispers now a faint hum that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Ezra stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the moonlit fog, his shoulders tense. "You sure you're okay?" Ezra asked again, turning to face Kai. His voice was soft, but there was a weight to it, like he was carrying more than he let on. Kai nodded, though his hands still trembled slightly. "Yeah, just not used to seeing dead guys in mirrors." Ezra's lips quirked into a half-smile, but his eyes were serious. "You handled it better than I did my first time." He crossed the room, sitting on the edge of Kai's bed again, close enough that their thighs brushed. The contact sent a jolt through Kai, grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. "What's your deal, Ezra?" Kai asked, his voice quieter than he meant. "You act like this is normal. Ghosts, whispers, all of it." Ezra's gaze dropped to the floor, his fingers tracing the scar above his eyebrow. "It's not normal. But I've been here a year, and let's just say I've seen things. Felt things." He paused, his eyes flicking up to meet Kai's. "I stayed because I needed to understand. And now, I think I'm starting to." Kai's breath hitched. There was something raw in Ezra's voice, something that made Kai want to reach out, to close the distance between them. But the whispers grew louder, a sharp hiss that made them both flinch. Kai glanced at the wall above Ezra's bed, where the scratch marks seemed darker, more pronounced, like it was growing. "Ezra," Kai said, his voice tight. "That mark, it wasn't that big before, was it?" Ezra followed his gaze, his expression darkening. "No, it wasn't." He stood, crossing to the wall and running his fingers over the jagged lines. They looked like claw marks now, etched deep into the wood. "He's getting stronger. Daniel. He's feeding off something." "Feeding?" Kai's stomach twisted. "Like what?" Ezra turned, his eyes locking onto Kai's with an intensity that made his chest ache. "Emotions. Fear, anger, love. Strong feelings make him realer. I've seen it before with other students. The more you feel, the more he notices." Kai's face heated, his mind flashing to the moment their hands had intertwined in room 315. Had Daniel seen that? Felt it? He pushed the thought away, focusing on Ezra. "So what do we do? Just not feel anything." Ezra laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Good luck with that. You're human, Kai. We both are." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "But we can figure out what he wants. Why he's still here. Maybe then he'll leave us alone." Kai nodded, his heart pounding not just from fear, but from the way Ezra was looking at him, like he was the only thing in the room that mattered. "Okay, where do we start?" Ezra hesitated, then reached for his notebook on the desk. He flipped it open, revealing pages filled with sketches and handwritten notes. Some were of Blackthorn Hall, its spires and shadowed halls rendered in eerie detail. Others were fragments of poetry, or maybe lyrics, about loss and longing. One page caught Kai's eye, a sketch of a boy with dark hair and wide eyes, eerily similar to himself. "Is that me?" Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ezra's cheeks flushed, a rare crack in his usual confidence. "Maybe. I draw what I see. And you're hard to ignore." The admission hung between them, heavy and warm. Kai's hand twitched, wanting to touch Ezra, to bridge the gap. But before he could, the room plunged into darkness, the overhead light flickering out. The whispers surged, a chorus of anguished voices, and the temperature dropped sharply. "Ezra." Kai reached out, his hand finding Ezra's arm in the dark. The other boy was trembling, but his grip was firm as he pulled Kai closer. "Stay with me," Ezra whispered, his breath warm against Kai's ear. "He's here." A low moan echoed through the room, not from the walls, but from the air itself. Kai's eyes darted to the mirror above the desk, where a faint glow pulsed. In the reflection, Daniel's figure stood clearer now, his hollow eyes fixed on them, his noose swaying slightly. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another figure flickered beside him, a boy with soft features and sad eyes, reaching out as if pleading. "Who's that?" Kai whispered, his voice shaking. Ezra's grip tightened. I don't know, but I've seen him before. In my dreams. The mirror cracked, a sharp sound that made Kai jump. The second figure vanished, but Daniel remained, his gaze boring into them. The whispers formed words now, faint but clear. You can't have him. Kai's heart seized. Who's he talking about? Ezra didn't answer, but his hand slid down to clasp Kai's, their fingers interlocking. The warmth of his touch was a lifeline in the icy room. We need to get out of here, Ezra said, his voice urgent. Now. They stumbled out of the room, the door slamming shut behind them. The hallway was no better, the air thick with a presence that felt like it was watching, waiting. Ezra led Kai to the stairwell, their hands still clasped, until they reached the ground floor, where the fog outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. Chapter 5. Closer in the dark. Outside, the quad was silent, the fog swallowing the world beyond Blackthorn Hall. Kai and Ezra sat on a bench under a gnarled oak, their breath visible in the cold night air. The dorm loomed behind them, its windows like empty eyes. Kai's heart was still racing, but Ezra's presence beside him, solid, warm, kept him grounded. You okay? Ezra asked, his voice softer now, almost tender. Kai nodded, though his hands were still shaking. Yeah, just what the hell was that? Who's the other guy in the mirror? Ezra leaned back, his eyes distant. I don't know, but I've dreamed about him. He's always sad, always reaching out. I think he's tied to Daniel. Maybe they were together. Kai's chest tightened. Like in love. Ezra nodded, his gaze flicking to Kai. Yeah, like us. The words hit Kai like a shockwave, his face heating despite the cold. Us. Ezra's eyes widened, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence faltering. I mean shit. You feel it too, right? This thing between us. Kai's heart pounded, his mind a jumble of fear and longing. He thought of the way Ezra's touch had steadied him, the way his smile made the dorm's darkness bearable. Yeah, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I feel it. Ezra's expression softened, a mix of relief and something deeper. He reached out, his hand brushing Kai's cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of his jaw. The touch was gentle, intimate, and Kai leaned into it, his eyes fluttering shut. For a moment, the world was just them. No ghosts, no whispers, just the warmth of Ezra's hand and the quiet thud of Kai's heart. Then a branch snapped nearby, and they pulled apart, their eyes darting to the fog. Nothing was there, but the air felt charged, like something was watching. Ezra stood, pulling Kai to his feet. We can't stay out here. Let's go to the library. There's old records about Blackthorn. Maybe we can find out who Daniel was, and who the other guy is. Kai nodded, his hand still tingling from Ezra's touch. Okay, but what you said. About us. We're talking about that later, right? Ezra's smile was small, almost shy. Yeah, promise. Chapter 6. The Archive's Truth. The university library was a sprawling stone building, its basement archives a maze of dusty shelves and flickering fluorescent lights. Kai and Ezra pored over old yearbooks and campus newspapers, their shoulders brushing as they sat at a worn table. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, but it was a relief to be away from Blackthorn's oppressive atmosphere. Kai found it first, a grainy photo in a 1973 yearbook. Daniel Harper, a junior with sharp cheekbones and haunted eyes, staring at the camera like he was already half gone. Next to him, in another photo, was a boy with softer features, smiling faintly. The caption read, Elliot Moore, sophomore. That's him, Ezra said, his voice low. The guy from my dreams. And the mirror. They dug deeper, finding a newspaper article tucked away in a forgotten file. Tragedy at Blackthorn Hall. Student found dead in apparent suicide. Daniel Harper, 20, had been found in room 313, a noose around his neck. The article mentioned rumors of a broken heart, a forbidden romance with another student. Elliot Moore's name appeared in a follow-up piece, describing him as Daniel's roommate, who left the university shortly after the tragedy, never to return. Kai's stomach churned. They were in love, and something tore them apart. Ezra's hand found his under the table, a quiet gesture of comfort. Yeah, and now they're both stuck here, reliving it. Kai squeezed his hand, his heart aching for the boys in the photos, and for the boy beside him. What do we do? How do we help them? Ezra's eyes were intense, searching. We give them what they couldn't have. Closure. But it means facing them. In our room. Kai's throat tightened, but he nodded. Together? Ezra's smile was soft, almost fragile. Together. Chapter 7. The walk back to Blackthorn Hall was silent, the fog clinging to their clothes like a second skin. Kai's hand brushed against Ezra's as they moved, a tentative touch that lingered longer than necessary. The library's revelations about Daniel and Elliot weighed heavily on him. Two boys torn apart by a love they couldn't openly claim, ending in tragedy. He glanced at Ezra, whose stormy eyes reflected the same turmoil, and wondered if their own connection could withstand the shadows closing in. Back in room 313, the air was thick with an icy dread. The claw marks on the wall had deepened, now forming a jagged spiral that seemed to pulse faintly. The mirror above the desk was still cracked, its surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. Kai set the yearbook and newspaper clippings on the desk, his fingers trembling as he traced Daniel's photo. "We need to know more," Kai said, breaking the silence. "What happened between them? Why did Daniel?" Ezra nodded, his jaw tight. "The archives only gave us pieces. But I think Daniel's trying to tell us. That's why the whispers are louder when we're together." Kai's chest tightened. "Because we're like them?" Ezra's gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his guarded exterior. "Maybe. Or because he sees something in us he lost." He stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on Kai's shoulder. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down Kai's spine, grounding him amidst the creeping cold. "Let's try something," Ezra murmured. "Sit with me. Maybe if we focus, he'll show us more." They sat cross-legged on the floor, facing each other, their knees touching. Kai's heart raced as Ezra took his hands, their fingers interlocking. The contact was electric, a quiet intimacy that made the room's darkness feel less oppressive. Ezra closed his eyes, his voice low and steady. "Daniel, if you're here, show us. Help us understand." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the whispers surged, a cacophony of anguish and longing. The mirror's glow intensified, and the room seemed to tilt. Kai's vision blurred, and suddenly, he wasn't in the present anymore. Chapter 8. They were in room 313, but it was 1973. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture sparse but new. Two boys sat on a bed, Daniel Harper and Elliot Moore. Daniel, with his sharp cheekbones and haunted eyes, clutched a letter in his trembling hands. Elliot, softer and gentler, reached for him, his expression a mix of love and fear. "I can't keep hiding this," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "They saw us, Elliot. In the quad. Someone reported it to the dean." Elliot's hand tightened on Daniel's. "We'll figure it out. We always do. They can't take this from us." But the scene shifted, faster now. A stern man in a suit, presumably the dean, stood in the room, his voice cold. "This behavior is unacceptable. One of you will leave, or both will be expelled. Choose, or I will." Daniel's face twisted in despair as Elliot protested, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I won't leave you," Elliot said, but the dean's glare silenced him. The next moment, Daniel was alone, the letter crumpled in his fist, a rejection from Elliot, written under duress, claiming their love was a mistake. The vision faded, and Kai gasped, tears stinging his eyes. He looked at Ezra, who was pale, his own eyes wet. "They forced him to write that," Kai whispered. Elliot didn't want to end it, but they made him. Ezra nodded, his grip on Kai's hands tightening. And Daniel couldn't live with it. He thought Elliot abandoned him. The mirror flickered again, and Daniel's ghost appeared, clearer now. His hollow eyes were filled with sorrow, and behind him, Elliot's figure lingered, reaching out but unable to touch. The whispers formed words. "He left me. I couldn't bear it." Kai's heart ached for Daniel, for the love stolen by intolerance. He squeezed Ezra's hands, pulling him closer until their foreheads touched. "We can't let that happen to us," he murmured, his voice raw. Ezra's breath hitched, his hands sliding up to cup Kai's face. "It won't," he whispered, his thumbs brushing away Kai's tears. The space between them vanished as their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, a desperate affirmation of what they felt. The kiss was warm, tasting of salt and hope, and Kai's hands found Ezra's waist, pulling him closer. Ezra's fingers tangled in Kai's hair, the intimacy a shield against the room's cold presence. The mirror cracked louder, but they didn't pull apart. When they finally did, breathless and flushed, Daniel's ghost was gone, leaving only Elliot's faint outline, his expression softening as if at peace. Chapter 9. The room grew warmer, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. Kai and Ezra stayed close, their hands still linked, sitting on the bed now. The emotional toll of the vision lingered, but so did the newfound closeness between them. "I didn't know it could hurt that much," Kai said, his voice soft. "Losing someone you love like that." Ezra's eyes darkened, but he leaned into Kai, resting his head on his shoulder. "I felt it too. Not like Daniel, but losing people. It's why I stayed here, I think. Trying to find something worth holding on to." Kai turned, cupping Ezra's face, their noses brushing. "You've got me now." Ezra's smile was small but genuine, and he pressed a gentle kiss to Kai's lips, lingering this time. The kiss deepened, slow and tender, as Kai pulled Ezra onto his lap. Their bodies pressed together, the heat of their closeness a stark contrast to the dorm's lingering chill. Ezra's hand slid under Kai's sweater, tracing the skin of his back, sending shivers through him. Kai's breath caught, his own hands exploring the planes of Ezra's chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "I've wanted this," Ezra murmured against Kai's neck, his lips brushing the sensitive skin there. "Since you walked in." Kai's response was a soft moan, tilting his head to give Ezra more access. The intimacy was overwhelming, a mix of passion and vulnerability, as they clung to each other. The room faded away, the ghosts a distant memory as they lost themselves in the moment. A sudden thud jolted them apart. Daniel's ghost had returned, his form more solid, his eyes wild with rage. The whispers screamed, "You can't replace him." The claw marks on the wall bled black, and the temperature dropped again. Ezra pulled Kai behind him, his voice firm. "Daniel, we're not replacing you. We're honoring you. Let Elliot go. Let yourself go." The ghost hesitated, his form flickering. Elliot's figure appeared again, his hand outstretched toward Daniel. The mirror glowed, and for a moment, their ghostly hands touched, a silent reunion. Then both figures faded, the room falling silent. Chapter 10. The morning sun spilled through the cracked window of room 313, painting the room in hues of gold and amber. The oppressive chill of Blackthorn Hall was gone, replaced by a quiet warmth that seemed to seep into the very walls. Kai and Ezra remained on the bed, tangled in each other's arms, their breath steady but their hearts still racing from the night's events. The claw marks had vanished, the mirror above the desk now just a fractured piece of glass, reflecting nothing but their own tired faces. Daniel and Elliot's ghosts were gone, their love finally acknowledged, their pain released. Kai traced the scar along Ezra's jaw, his fingers gentle but deliberate, as if memorizing every detail of the boy who'd become his anchor. "Do you think they're really at peace?" he asked, his voice soft, almost afraid to break the fragile calm. Ezra tilted his head, pressing a kiss to Kai's palm. "Yeah, we gave them what they needed, someone to see their truth, to say it out loud." His hazel eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his usual bravado. "Like we're doing for us." Kai's cheeks flushed, his heart swelling at the words. He leaned in, resting his forehead against Ezra's, their noses brushing in a quiet, intimate moment. "I meant what I said last night," Kai murmured. "I don't want to lose you." Not like they lost each other. Ezra's hand found Kai's, their fingers interlocking as they had so many times before, but now with a certainty that hadn't been there before. "You won't," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I'm not going anywhere, Kai. Not now, not ever." He sealed the promise with a kiss, slow and deep, their lips moving together as if to etch the moment into their souls. Kai's hand slid to Ezra's waist, pulling him closer, the warmth of their bodies a shield against the lingering echoes of the dorm's past. As they parted, breathless and flushed, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft, melodic hum, like a distant lullaby. It wasn't the anguished whispers of Daniel's ghost, but something gentler, almost grateful. Kai glanced at the mirror, half expecting to see Daniel or Elliot, but it remained still. Yet the hum lingered, a final goodbye from two souls who had found each other again. Ezra stood, pulling Kai up with him. "Come on," he said, a playful edge returning to his voice. Let's get out of this room for a bit. Fresh air, coffee, maybe a real date. He winked, but his hand stayed firmly in Kai's, grounding them both. They stepped into the hallway, the dorm no longer oppressive but still carrying a faint weight, as if Blackthorn Hall itself remembered its ghosts. The campus outside was alive with the hum of students, the fog gone, the sky clear and impossibly blue. Kai glanced back at room 313's door, now just an ordinary door, and felt a pang of bittersweet relief. Daniel and Elliot's story had ended in tragedy, but it had given him and Ezra something precious, a chance to write their own story, one where love didn't have to hide. As they walked across the quad, hands still clasped, Ezra nudged Kai's shoulder. So what's next? No more haunted dorms, I hope. Kai laughed, the sound light and free. No promises, but as long as you're with me, I can handle a few ghosts. Ezra's grin was radiant, and he pulled Kai into another kiss. This one quick but full of promise, right there in the open quad where Daniel and Elliot had once been torn apart. It felt like defiance, like a vow to live differently. As they walked away, the faintest breeze carried that same melodic hum, and for a moment, Kai swore he saw two figures in the distance, Daniel and Elliot, hand in hand, fading into the sunlight. But when he blinked, they were gone, leaving only the warmth of Ezra's hand in his and the hope of a future they'd build together. Epilogue. Weeks later, Kai and Ezra had settled into a rhythm, study sessions, late-night talks, stolen kisses in the library stacks. Room 313 was theirs now, no longer haunted but marked by their own memories. They'd framed a small photo of Daniel and Elliot, pieced together from the archives, and hung it by the desk as a quiet tribute. One night, as Kai traced lazy circles on Ezra's back while they lay in bed, a faint creak came from the hallway. They froze, sharing a glance, but no whispers followed. No cold descended, just the dorm settling into its new life. Think it's them? Kai asked, half joking. Ezra smirked, pulling Kai closer. Nah, just the house saying goodnight. Or maybe it's jealous of us. Kai laughed, burying his face in Ezra's chest, and as they drifted to sleep, the dorm was silent, truly silent, for the first time in decades. But in the quiet, Blackthorn Hall seemed to hum with approval, its ghosts at rest, its new story just beginning.